everyone, it's Maria, and welcome to the Breaking Up with Toxicity podcast. Thank you for being with me today. Each week, I will connect with people as they share relatable life experiences. We will talk about and at times challenge reoccurring unhealthy and toxic patterns that keep you from the changes you want to see as you break these unhealthy cycles. So let's get started and see where this show will take us today. Be sure to listen and don't forget to follow so that you never miss an episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breaking Up with Toxicity. I'm Maria Shkreli, and I'm the host of the show. This is a space where we get real about the messy, uncomfortable, and deeply human parts of healing. To my returning listeners, welcome back. You already know what this is. We don't dance around dysfunction here. We talk about it, we name it, and we learn how to break it. And to those who are new, welcome. You're in the right place. This isn't another Think Positive podcast. It's about the truth, your patterns, and the work it takes to stop repeating what's breaking you. Today, we're diving into a topic everyone feels, but few actually understand. And it's the difference between anger and rage, because one is healthy and the other one destroys. One tells you something's wrong, while the other one burns everything down. And if you don't know how to tell the difference, you keep confusing volatility with passion and keep calling trauma chemistry. So what I want you to do is grab some paper, pen, and maybe even a cup of coffee or your journal, or maybe just a little courage, because today we're going to get honest about the fire that's inside of you, where it comes from and why it controls you, and how to finally take the power back from it. So here we go. Rage versus anger. We need to stop calling it the same thing because it is two different things. That's the first step here. And everyone does feel anger, but not everybody knows how to do with it and what to do with it. That's where the problem lies. Anger isn't actually bad. What it is, it's a message. It's your body saying something's not right here. But when that message gets ignored, buried, or even twisted, it doesn't just disappear. What happens, it actually mutates. And that's when anger turns into rage. That kind that burns everything in its path, including you. See, we live in a world where people either explode or they shut down. So they go one extreme to the other. You've got the yellers, you've got the door slammers, then I'm fine, silent treatment experts, all acting out the same emotional confusion in different costumes. Most of us were never taught that anger can actually be healthy. That is, it can guide us, it even protects us. Instead, we were taught that it's actually dangerous and it's bad. So what we did is we buried it, we swallowed it, until one day it started swallowing us and taking over. In today's episode, we're going to unpack the differences between anger and rage, where they come from, how they show up, and why so many of us actually weaponize them without even realizing it. We're calling out the enablers. Yes, we can never forget the enablers, the ones who feed the fire, play the victim, or actually even manipulate the emotion to control the story. Because here's the truth. Toxic dynamics do not survive without participation. I'm going to repeat it again. Toxic dynamics do not survive without participation. You know the old famous, it takes two to tango? Well, it does. This episode is not about blaming. It's about raising awareness. You can't change what you don't understand. And this right here is where you start understanding it. So get ready, everybody. Buckle up. We're going to strip the shame of anger, expose, and maybe, just maybe, help you stop mistaking destruction for expression. Okay, let's start. Anger isn't bad. Anger is information. It's not chaos, and it's actually not communication. It's the emotional smoke alarm that says, whoa, wait a minute, something's off, something hurts, something feels unfair. But the problem is most people were never taught how to hear that alarm go off, only how to silence it. Maybe you grew up in a house where yelling was terrifying, so you learned to swallow your feelings and you called it keeping the peace. Or maybe anger was the only emotion that ever got heard, so now you explode at every inconvenience because that's the only way you know how to feel seen. Either way, your relationship with anger got pretty screwed up, even before you ever got a chance to form a healthy one. So, anger at its core, it's actually about boundaries. It shows up when your needs are being dismissed, your values are being violated, or your truth is actually being ignored. But if you never learn how to set those boundaries clearly, what happens is anger becomes the only tool you have, and that is a terrible multitasker. Anger can protect you or it can destroy you, depending how you use it. I'm going to give you an example. Here's a partner dynamic. You tell your partner something is bothering you. They dismiss it and say, "Oh, you're just too sensitive." And then they walk away. You stay calm at first, but inside you're actually boiling, not because of that one comment, but because it's the 100th time that you weren't heard. So later that week, they leave a dish in the sink and you snap. Now you're yelling about the plate when what you're really angry about was the disrespect. That's misplaced anger, the kind that eats away at love. Very problematic. So I'm going to give you a different example. This is in the workplace. At work, you take on every task because saying no feels like a failure to you. You think being helpful will earn you safety or validation, but when your boss gives you one more thing and doesn't acknowledge your effort, you go home actually pretty furious and in a bad mood. You don't sleep, you ruminate, you complain to your friends about this. You're not mad about the work. What you're actually mad is that you betrayed yourself by not speaking up. That's what unprocessed anger does. It redirects at everyone except the person that it belongs to. Anger isn't just yelling or snapping. It's the tight chest, the eye roll that comes in, the sarcasm and the withdrawal. It's the emotional energy of I do matter. Hey, look at me. And everyone's acting like I don't. But here's the catch though. When you've been living in dysfunction, you can't tell the difference between expression and explosion. You think standing up for yourself is the same as being aggressive. And that's how healthy anger turns into unhealthy rage. Now, before we go any further, I want you to take a minute, hit the pause button, and I want you to ask yourself something. When I feel angry, do I listen to what it's trying to tell me, or do I try to control someone else with it? If it's the second one, you're not expressing. What you're doing is you're manipulating. And that's where the danger begins because that's not anger anymore. That's actually called rage. But before we go on to there, first I want to talk about the different faces of anger. So it's not all about yelling and slamming doors. Here's where most people get anger wrong. Anger is not a one size fits all. It's not just the screaming, it's not punching walls, it's not storming off. Anger wears so many different disguises. It can be loud, it can be quiet, it can be polished, and it can actually, as we know, be very passive. It's like a shapeshifter that shows up in different forms depending on how safe or unsafe we feel expressing it. And because we don't recognize these forms, what we do is we mislabel ourselves and others. We call someone cold when they're actually boiling inside. We call somebody dramatic when they're desperately trying to be heard. So I'm going to break this down for you because understanding your style of anger is the key to start breaking your toxic patterns. Here's the first one, the explosive anger. We're going to call this the volcano. This one's so easy to spot. It is so intense, it's fast, and it leaves destruction in its wake. You see red, you lose control, and the goal becomes one thing, release. These are the people who yell, throw things, punch walls, or say things that they can't take back. But here's the thing, behind this kind of explosive anger, it's actually usually powerlessness. It's not strength and it's not fear. It's the fear of being ignored, dismissed, or even unseen. So here's an example. You're arguing with a partner. They keep on scrolling on their phone while you're talking. You feel so dismissed, disrespected, and your blood pressure spikes up, right? Before you even process it, you're shouting. Maybe you're slamming doors. Maybe you're saying, "You never listened to me." 5 minutes later, you feel shame and or guilt. You start cleaning up the mess or apologizing because you didn't mean it. You just wanted them to see you. That's not just anger, that's actual desperation. So the volcano erupting was because you didn't know how to calmly say, I feel invincible when you do that. Now we're going to move on to the passive aggressive anger. This is the smiling assassin, I call it. The one that's so sneaky. It looks so polite, it sounds so calm, but you know what underneath? It's cold, cold, cold resentment. You won't yell, but you will ignore. You won't confront, but you will withdraw. You'll smile through your teeth and say, it's fine when it clearly is not fine. So, an example here is a coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. You don't speak up, you just shut down. You start showing up late to team projects, you stop responding to emails, or you do the bare minimum. You're getting even in silence. That's what's going on. Well, passive aggressive anger is still aggression. It's just dressed up as self-control. You think you're avoiding the conflict, but what you're actually doing is you're feeding it. You're turning your hurt into quiet punishment. And the irony of this, you call yourself non confrontational, but you're still fighting. You're just doing it underground. It's just a different way. Okay, here we are. Number 3. This is the suppressed anger. I call this one the pressure cooker. This is one of the most dangerous ones because it pretends it doesn't exist. You tell yourself you're the calm one. You pride yourself on never losing control. But that is because you never learned that it was safe to actually express your emotions. You're the person who says, I don't get angry, which usually means you're always angry. You just internalize it. It shows up as headaches, resentment, anxiety, or even burnout. So, an example here is you keep on agreeing to help everyone, your boss, your family, your friends, until one day you snap over something small like someone using your mug. And everyone's shocked because you're always so nice. You're always so calm. No, you're not nice. You're not calm. You're numb. You're actually numb. You've been swallowing your boundaries for years, and finally your body said, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm done. Suppressed anger is the breeding ground for so much intense rage. When you don't give your anger a voice, what happens? It starts to find its way out, and it never comes out gently when this happens. Our next one is the self directed anger, and this is called the internal bully. Not all anger gets aimed outward. Some of us turn it inward. We beat ourselves up for mistakes. We replay every awkward moment and we call it self reflection. But not all the time. It's not always self reflection, it's called self destruction. For example, you forget something really important, a call, maybe an appointment, and you immediately, your inner voice goes, whoa, of course you did. You're such an idiot. Oh, of course you did. You're just so dumb. Oh, because you're so careless. So, whatever that negative self talk is about, you think it's accountability, but what it actually is, it's abuse coming from yourself, from you. This type of anger often develops in people who were punished for expressing it when they were growing up. So they learn, if I can't be mad at other people, I'm just going to be mad at myself. So it's guilt masquerading as control. That's what's going on here. Now we're on to our last anger, and this is the chronic anger, and I call it the perpetual victim. This is the person who's always angry at someone, at life, at the system, at the world. They live in a constant state of, I've been wronged. I have been wronged. Everyone does wrong. I have been wronged. It is so addictive because anger releases adrenaline. It gives you a hit of energy, of control, even if it's toxic. But chronic anger does eat away at your empathy. You stop seeing solutions and you only see things as enemies and people as enemies. What also happens here is that you actually become allergic to accountability. So, for example, your friend is late, and instead of thinking, well, maybe traffic was bad or something happened, you instantly assume that they don't respect you. That assumption turns into a whole story. The story itself turns into a belief, and the belief turns into identity. I'm always the one who cares more. And just like that, what you've built is your whole personality around resentment. That absolutely is not power. What that is that's poison disguised as pride. Before we go any deeper, I want you to ask yourself the following. Which version of anger do you live in? Do you blow up, shut down, or do you punish silently? And then, do you let anger teach you or do you let it control you? Because the form of anger you practice is the shape of your emotional maturity. If you don't want to manage your anger, it's definitely going to manage you. And when it does, you'll start calling destruction expression. That's when your anger starts to become rage, and that's where we're going to head to next. So, what really is rage? That's the monster that anger becomes when it's ignored. Anger is a message, but rage is the explosion that happens when you ignore the message for too long. Rage is not just about being mad. It's actually emotional hijacking. That's when the nervous system is on fire. It's what happens when the brain's rational part completely shuts down and survival mode takes the wheel. If anger says something's not right, rage is going to scream, "Whoa, wait a minute. Nothing will ever be right unless I destroy what's in front of me." This is where people lose the control of words, of actions, and actually of reality itself. Rage is not about the moment you're in. It's about everything that came before it. Every every wound, every dismissal, every overreaction, every time you were made to feel powerless and unheard. Rage happens when emotional pain collides with powerlessness. You feel trapped, unheard, unseen, or helpless. And instead of processing, your body goes into like this war. Your brain, your emotional alarm system floods you with adrenaline and cortisol. Your body thinks you're like fighting for survival, not having an argument. So logic completely shuts off. Empathy flies out the window, and all that's left is defense mode. And when rage takes over, it's not about what's true anymore. That's out the window. It's about what feels threatening. That's why rage can twist reality. It rewrites conversation and it makes you believe your reaction is justified. But the kicker here is rage always costs you something. It destroys the safety, it destroys the trust and the connection, even when it feels like power in the moment. So what triggers rage most often, it's an emotional landmine, right? It's built from your history. That's not just about what's happening now. It's about being unseen and unresolved issues for many, many years. So here are the most common ones. One is feeling ignored, dismissed, or replaced. That's the rejection. Then there's shame, where there's feeling of being exposed, humiliated, or less than. Then the abandonment, the fear that someone you love is going to pull away. It's the loss of control when someone challenges your sense of dominance or even certainty. Then the last one is injustice, when something feels deeply, so deeply unfair or even disrespectful. These triggers are what ignite rage because they touch the deepest wounds within people, the feeling that you're not safe or you're not even valued. Now I'm going to talk about the types of rage. There are three, and they're very intense and what they actually look like. The first one is called IED, Intermittent Explosive Disorder. And this is a rage in its rawest. It's the most unpredictable form. And it's the person who goes from 0 to 100 in seconds, literally in seconds. They can punch walls, scream, break things, or lash out verbally before they even know what happened. Keep in mind, it's very impulsive. They're not monsters. What's happened is that they're flooded. Their brain literally short circuits. And when the storm passes, they feel so much shame, confusion, and even grief. So, what usually triggers them is when they are irritable, irritated, and or frustrated. It's like a system overload. And because of the impulsivity, that's when they lash out and they react that way. So, an example of this one is a partner forgets to text you back. Instead of "I'm worried," it's "you don't care about me," followed by shouting, tears, or even slamming doors. Afterward, they do feel awful. They're apologetic, maybe even terrified of themselves. So, IED is a rage as an emotional seizure. It's not choice. They do not choose to do this. It's important that you understand this. Now, once they are aware that this is IED, then it is their responsibility to work on this. Now we're going to move on to the second. Here's your borderline rage. This is the abandonment explosion. Borderline rage has to do with emotional dysregulation. When one feels unloved, lonely, the fear of abandonment really sets in. This is the trigger that leads to the lashing out of that intense rage. This one is from a really deep emotional terror. So people with borderline traits don't rage because they hate you. They rage because they need you. It's the opposite. They fear that you're going to abandon them, and it's the fear is so intense that any hint of a distance feels like death to them. So, an example here is, let's say their partner says, I just need some space. What they hear is, I'm leaving you. And in that split second, their love turns into panic. The panic turns into fury, and the fury becomes, I hate you, don't leave me. The rage isn't calculated. What it actually is, it's survival for them. They feel remorse after, and it's really deep. It's actually gut wrenching remorse for them, but by then the damage is done. And unless they learn how to manage that feel, that cycle actually repeats: love, fear, rage, regret. Okay? Love, fear, rage, regret. And once they have awareness to this, it is their responsibility to decrease intensity and frequency. And same for the person with IED. Okay, here we go to the most interesting one: your narcissistic rage. This is totally the ego defense system here. So watch out. Now, this one is the most different compared to the other two. Remember, the other two do feel remorse and guilt. Now, with narcissistic rage, this does not come from any fear of abandonment. This does not come from being impulsive. This comes from, guess what? Injury to the ego. You bruise their ego, you're done. It's the explosion that happens when someone feels exposed, criticized, or actually insignificant. So with narcissistic rage, there's actually two. One is the outward rage. This is where the yelling, the blaming, the attacking, and the humiliating happens. And I should say, there's the inward rage. This is the stonewalling, the silent treatment, the revenge planning, or the emotional withdrawal. With a narcissistic, the partner gets called out for lying, let's say. Instead of remorse, what they do is they double down, right? They yell, they gaslight, they say you're crazy, and turn the story around until they're the victim. They might even go quiet, cold, detached, punishing silence because it gives them the control again. This rage is not about love, okay? It's purely about dominance. It's about punishing anyone who threatens their image, also who threatens their ego. Here, there is no apology. They don't feel bad, they don't feel remorse. And the reason is because it's your fault. You did this, you created it, you deserve it. Let me just briefly summarize. Is there remorse for these three different rages? With IED, yes. There's a lot of intense shame, and they do regret doing this. With borderline, yes, there is a deep remorse. Their fear of loss and emotional collapse is so extreme. With narcissistic rage, rarely and probably never really there's any remorse. And if there is, it's often maybe manipulation, and it's a way to reset their control. So now we're going to move on. How does rage and enablers dance together? This is one dynamic that is so interesting. Rage does not exist in a vacuum, okay? There's always an audience, everyone, a partner, a friend, a family member who either absorbs it, excuses it, or actually fuels it. And that's what we call the enabler. They mean well, most often. They want to keep the peace, but what they're really doing is protecting the dysfunction. They'll say things like, well, they don't mean it, they're just under so much stress. If I stay calm, they'll calm down. Or they'll say something like, I don't want to make things worse. And before they know it, they're walking on eggshells. They're losing themselves in someone else's storm. Some enablers become people pleasers. They overfunction, they fix, and they absorb, hoping to control that chaos that exists. Others actually become great manipulators. Yeah, they do. Most people don't think about that. They weaponize the rage outbursts to gain the sympathy and play the victim or make themselves look like the stable one. Either way, both are part of the same toxic cycle. One explodes, one absorbs. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. One explodes and one absorbs. One controls with anger, the other one controls with guilt. And guess what? Neither one takes the responsibility. That's the irony of this. Anger says, I deserve to be heard. Rage says, if you don't hear me, I'll make you. One seeks understanding while the other one seeks control. Anger can build boundaries, rage will burn them down. And if I don't learn the difference, you will confuse volatility with passion and keep on calling trauma as chemistry. That's what's going to continue to happen. Now, let's continue and talk about the enablers, who they are, and why they can be really dangerous. You've heard about anger and you've heard about rage. Now I'm going to introduce you to the other half of the toxic duet, I call it, the enabler. These people are not innocent bystanders. They're actually very active participants. Sometimes they're wounded, sometimes they're scared, sometimes they're really calculating, but always critical to the survival of the dysfunction. That's a fact. As an enabler's job, whether they realize it or not, it is to keep the system running. They smooth, they excuse, they justify, they minimize, or they rewrite reality. So the explosive person doesn't have to change. And they do it long enough that they create a culture where the rage is the language and everyone else learns to speak it or get out. Enablers are not the same as victims. Please remember that. Enablers are not the same as victims. Many enablers were once victims themselves. They led survival strategies early, and then they made those strategies into roles. But roles can become prisons, and the person playing nice becomes the person helping abuse survive. Enablers show up in so many different for so many different reasons. So the most common ones are, one is fear of conflict. If I rock the boat, something worse will happen. So they silence themselves and everyone else. They also have people pleasing identity. Their worth is tied to being needed, useful, the fixer. Saying no feels wrong. Then you have the shame and the avoidance. They've been punished for confrontation before, so avoidance feels very safe. They control through calm. They believe that keeping a facade of calm keeps them in control, but it's control via denial. That's what that is. Then there's the manipulative intent. In the worst cases, they actively weaponize the chaos to gain sympathy or power. This is very dangerous, but at the same time, I see it pretty often. Each of these is understandable, but none of them is safe. Enabling prolongs harm. Enabling is never good. Remember that. What's worse is enablers manipulate and weaponize emotions. Enablers don't always help because they're kind. Often they help because the system actually benefits them. They use emotional work as currency. So their tactics, there's actually a tactic to this. They minimize and they reframe. They'll say things like, they didn't mean it, or you misunderstood them. That downplays the harmed person's experience and it protects the rager. That's what that does. Gaslighting the reality. They will repeat stories that paint the rager as stressed, as exhausted, or misunderstood, while making the other person sound crazy or oversensitive. Then here's the playing the victim, the protector. They publicly support the rager, then privately manipulate. If you leave, I'm going to be left to clean up the mess. This flips the responsibility and breeds the guilt. When these tactics are repeated, the victim of rage begins to doubt themselves. That's what happens here. Friends and family start to take sides, and the rager learns explode, someone covers, right? Consequences and disappear. That's the feedback loop that keeps the rage alive. The partnership destroys both people. For the rager, enablers remove the consequences. Without consequences, there's no motivation to change. The rage becomes the easy path to getting needs met, even if it's by intimidation. Over the time, the person loses agency. They're a tyrant trapped in their own fury. For the enabler, they lose boundaries and self respect. They absorb stress, resentment, and blame. Their identity becomes caretaker of chaos, which erodes their health, their sanity, and actually their ability to have equal relationships. For everyone else, kids, friends, coworkers, families, the environment becomes unsafe. Children learn to fear emotion or mimic the manipulation. So, here I'm going to go through a few examples to help you better understand this. So, here's example one, the it's stress defense. A rager screams at a partner after a long day. The enabler steps in. They're just stressed, you know. You know how it works. You know how it gets difficult at work. The partner defends themselves, and then it's told, see, you made them worse. And the end result of this, the partner doubts themselves and the rager never apologizes. Here's a second example. This I'm going to call the replay and the record trick. After an outburst, the enabler privately records or texts selective snippets to others. He freaked out over nothing. You'll see how unstable he is. I'm going to prove it. The enabler frames the narrative to isolate the rage person and gain allies. Accusations escalate, reputations do suffer, and then you're talking if children are involved, legal and child custody implications can follow with this. Then we have another example, what I call the martyr protector. The enabler publicly acts like the one holding the family together. I'm the only one who can calm them. But privately, they guilt the victim. If you just forgive, we'd have peace. The enabler profits emotionally from being needed, while the rager here is never asked to change. Here's another example. I call this split and conquer. This is when the enabler makes the other person look unreasonable to a friend, a therapist. Then what they actually do is they position the rager as the wounded one in need of support. This undermines the harmed person's credibility and it isolates them. And then the last one is the legal and the social weaponization. This is where the enabler exaggerates incidents, files complaints, or threatens to call CPS or the police when the harmed person pushes back. The aim here is to silence dissent by invoking authority, often ruining livelihoods and relationships. This is pretty intense. When an enabler weaponizes rage, they can ruin careers, custody cases, and reputations. They turn emotional conflict into legal and social warfare. The person with anger becomes the monster on paper. That's the cruel twist here. It's the system can punish the wrong person, and the enabler story often wins because it's easier to believe a really neat narrative than a messy truth. That's what goes on in here. You cannot separate the rager from the system that feeds them. If you're listening and you recognize yourself as an enabler, you need to stop pretending ignorance is neutral. It's not. Your silence and smoothing are contributing to the harm. And if you're being labeled as an abuser because an enabler flipped the script, document, seek support, get professional assessments. But also ask, did I contribute to this dynamic? Even honest people sometimes enable by default. Own it. Own it, own it. I always say own your role and change it. If you want to start unpicking this, do one thing today. I want you to name the role that you play in your relationships. Are you the rager, the enabler, or are you the neutral observer? I want you to write this down. Then write one small action you can take to break the pattern, whether it's a boundary, a document incident, a therapy referral, or a no. You will practice this. Breaking these cycles isn't drama free. It's not always pleasant, but it's how you stop feeding monsters and start building real accountability and stop blaming others. So we're going to do a little bit self-reflection because the mirror doesn't lie. Let's end with some accountability because this part isn't about blaming, it's about breaking your patterns. So I want you to take a deep breath and ask yourself, what role do you play when conflicts erupt? Are you the one who explodes or are you the one who absorbs? That's number one. Number two, when I'm angry, do I express it or do I weaponize it? Number three, when someone else is angry, do I hold them accountable or do I excuse it to keep the peace? Both rage and enabling are controlling strategies, as we've learned. They're just done in different ways and for different reasons. One controls through force, the other one controls through compliance, but both destroy the intimacy, safety, and trust in relationships. If you identify as the one who loses control, stop romanticizing it. Stop, stop, stop. Stop calling it, it's just how I am. Your anger has roots, but it also has consequences. You can't heal what you refuse to name. Rage isn't power. Okay, remember that. It's pain in disguise. And every time you justify it, you give trauma permission to keep running your life. So, your challenge is write down the 3 moments this week where your anger took over. And next to each, I want you to write down what you were really feeling underneath it. Was it fear, shame, rejection, loss, or control? You'll start to see a pattern, and that pattern will show you what still needs healing. If you're the fixer, the smoother, the one who's always says it's not fine. Stop it. You're not keeping peace. You're keeping secrets. That's what you're doing. You're the one protecting others, but you're really protecting the fear of confrontation. Every time you absorb someone else's outburst, you teach them that it's safe to hurt you. And over time, that's how you lose your voice and your sense of self. So, your challenge is going to be write down one boundary you're afraid to set and one consequence you've been avoiding enforcing. Then I want you to practice saying it out loud. You don't owe anyone comfort at the cost of your sanity. And this applies to everybody. Healing starts where accountability meets empathy. You're not your worst moment and you're not beyond repair. But no one changes by being coddled or blamed. We change when we finally see the role that we play in the chaos that we keep on calling fate. You've been listening to Breaking Up with Toxicity, and today I want you to remember this. Anger isn't the enemy, denial is. Rage doesn't make you a monster, avoiding accountability does. And enabling doesn't make you kind, it actually makes you complacent. We're all wired by what we've survived, but we don't have to stay there. So if you're tired of being the one who explodes or the one who absorbs, this is your wake up call. You can't heal what you keep defending. So stop protecting the pattern, start protecting your peace. Because the moment you stop reacting and start reflecting, that's the moment you stop living in cycles and you start living in choice.